You've probably heard about the intimacy gap, how women often report lower satisfaction in intimate relationships while men seem to reach physical completion more consistently. And on the surface, that statistical pattern appears true. Men do experience completion more frequently. But here's what the research rarely discusses. There's a profound difference between physical completion and actually experiencing the deep emotional satisfaction and connection that creates lasting relationship fulfillment. Many men report what researchers call mechanical, intimate experiences. They're achieving physical outcomes, certainly, but they're missing the emotional depth, vulnerability, and profound connection their relationships are actually capable of providing. It's analogous to consuming nutrition without experiencing the pleasure of a thoughtfully prepared meal. The biological function occurs, the physical process completes, but the experience lacks emotional richness and relational meaning. Here's what relationship research consistently reveals. While men might reach physical completion more frequently, many report that their intimate experiences feel rushed, emotionally shallow, or disconnected from genuine relationship intimacy. They're following a script they believe intimacy is supposed to follow: efficient, straightforward, and focused on a single physical outcome, without understanding the deeper emotional and psychological dimensions available. But male capacity for emotional and physical intimacy extends far beyond this reductive formula. There are psychological needs most couples completely overlook, communication patterns that multiply emotional connection, and relationship approaches that can transform brief physical encounters into profound bonding experiences that strengthen long-term partnership satisfaction. The reason most couples never discover this deeper level of connection is straightforward. We've collectively accepted the cultural myth that male satisfaction is automatic, simple, and purely physical. We assume if physical completion occurs, the intimate experience was successful. But that's like assuming if someone consumed food, they must have enjoyed the meal and felt nourished by the experience. Physical completion and genuine intimate satisfaction are fundamentally different phenomena. Quick note before we dive in: this content provides educational information about adult relationships and intimacy. This is not medical advice, therapy, or professional counseling. Every relationship is unique. Always prioritize consent, communication, and personal boundaries. Consult qualified healthcare providers for medical concerns. Let's examine what's actually happening neurologically during intimate arousal. The brain floods with dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with pleasure, anticipation, and bonding, and this neurochemical buildup is where most of the psychological and emotional connection actually develops. The longer partners can maintain heightened emotional presence and connection before focusing solely on physical outcomes, the more intense the bonding and satisfaction becomes. Here's what most people don't understand. Male intimate response involves different psychological and physical sensitivity patterns that respond to completely different types of connection and touch. Different areas have varying nerve densities and require different approaches to create optimal satisfaction. Treating all intimate contact identically is like attempting to play complex music while wearing heavy gloves. The capacity exists, but the nuance and depth are lost. Most couples rush through the most emotionally connective phases: the building anticipation, the vulnerable communication, the almost there psychological intimacy, because they believe the physical destination is all that matters. But the relational journey is where genuine bonding and lasting satisfaction actually develop. Understanding these psychological principles doesn't just benefit male partners, it provides women with profound confidence and relational power. When you understand your partner's emotional and psychological needs more deeply than they might understand them themselves, when you can guide them toward vulnerable experiences they didn't know were possible, that creates a level of trust and connection that transforms your entire relationship dynamic. This isn't about performing or adopting artificial behaviors. It's about having the psychological knowledge and relational confidence to create experiences that bond both partners on much deeper levels. By understanding these principles, you'll comprehend the specific psychological needs that create the most profound satisfaction. the emotional triggers that allow genuine vulnerability, and the communication approaches that turn routine encounters into transformative bonding experiences. You're about to become the architect of emotional intimacy he never knew was missing. Let's start with the most overlooked aspect of male intimate anatomy: specific sensitivity zones that require different types of attention and communication. The frenulum, the small V-shaped area on the underside where the head connects to the shaft, represents one of the highest concentrations of nerve endings in the male body. Think of it as comparable to the clitoral region in terms of nerve density and sensitivity potential. Most couples either completely overlook this area during intimate contact or treat it identically to other regions. But understanding this specific sensitivity zone and communicating about focused, intentional attention here can create sensations that partners describe as profoundly more intense than generalized contact. Here's why this anatomical understanding matters. Those concentrated nerve endings evolved to respond to very specific types of gentle, focused stimulation. The neurological difference between targeted attention to high sensitivity zones versus generalized contact represents a fundamental distinction in how the nervous system processes and responds to intimate touch. Many men have never experienced or communicated about direct attention to this specific area because there's psychological vulnerability in directing a partner to such a precise, delicate location. Cultural conditioning around masculine communication creates barriers to expressing these specific needs, so they remain silent about anatomical preferences, even though appropriate attention to this area can represent the difference between adequate physical experience and profound intimate satisfaction. When providing manual attention, partners might consider using gentle, rhythmic pressure specifically to this V-shaped area while maintaining broader contact elsewhere. The contrast between focused sensation on high sensitivity zones and broader contact creates neurological complexity that many men have never experienced or communicated about. If this information is revealing aspects of intimate communication you never considered, please engage with this content by liking and subscribing for more relationship psychology that provides genuine insight into creating deeper partnership satisfaction. Now let's discuss something that creates discomfort for many people, but represents crucial anatomical knowledge for understanding male intimate response: the perineum, sometimes called the perineal region in medical terminology. Before dismissing this as too advanced or taboo, understand the biology. The perineum represents the external access point to the prostate gland, which functions as a significant pleasure and sensitivity center in male anatomy. And this access is completely external, requiring no internal contact whatsoever, making this an accessible anatomical understanding that doesn't require crossing boundaries partners might not be comfortable with. Here's the biological reality. The prostate is a walnut-sized gland positioned just behind the perineum, surrounded by an extensive network of nerve endings. When partners apply gentle, rhythmic pressure to the perineum during intimate contact, particularly as arousal intensifies, they're indirectly stimulating the prostate from outside the body. This creates a distinctly different neurological response that radiates through the entire pelvic region. Instead of localized sensation, it becomes what research subjects describe as full-body waves that originate deep internally and spread outward. Many men describe it as the difference between a localized sneeze and a full-body shiver response. The technique involves straightforward communication and gentle experimentation. Using fingers to apply firm but comfortable pressure to the perineum, partners are looking for a slight depression between the two anatomical regions, starting with steady pressure during arousal buildup, then experimenting with rhythmic pulsing that coordinates with other intimate contact. As intensity builds, slightly increasing pressure. Partners can incorporate this during manual stimulation by coordinating contact, one hand providing familiar stimulation while the other applies perineal pressure. During oral contact, reaching with fingers to access this external spot. The combination of sensations, familiar stimulation plus this deep, radiating pressure, creates intensity that most men have never experienced or communicated about. This isn't anal play that creates discomfort for some partners. This is understanding and accessing a legitimate anatomical pleasure center through completely external contact that requires no boundary crossing whatsoever. Let's discuss an anatomical area that receives minimal attention in most intimate encounters: the scrotum. Most partners either avoid this area entirely or treat it as an afterthought, but the scrotal tissue contains significant nerve endings and plays a crucial role in building overall arousal and intimate connection. Think of this region as an amplifier for everything else occurring during intimate contact. When partners incorporate gentle attention to this area, it adds layers of sensation that make primary stimulation feel significantly more intense. It's analogous to adding bass frequencies to music. Suddenly, everything has more depth and richness. The crucial principle here is gentleness. This anatomical region requires care and appropriate pressure, not rough or aggressive handling. But when approached with proper understanding and communication, it becomes a powerful element for building arousal and connection. Consider gentle cupping, where one partner softly holds this area while the other hand provides different contact elsewhere. The warmth and gentle pressure create comforting, grounding sensations that allow deeper psychological relaxation. Light touch with fingernails across scrotal tissue creates tingling sensations that travel through connected nerve pathways and intensifies other simultaneous stimulation. Temperature variation works effectively here too. Using warm hands or slightly cool lubricant on this area creates contrast that makes nerve endings respond more actively. During oral contact, partners shouldn't neglect this region. Gentle attention, light contact, or even just warm breath on this area, while hands provide other stimulation, creates multi-layered experiences that partners report as significantly more intense than focusing on single areas. The scrotum also responds to arousal through muscle contraction, so paying attention to this area provides real-time feedback about arousal levels, allowing partners to adjust pace and intensity accordingly through responsive communication. Here's something most women don't realize. While you might be mentally preoccupied with body image or performance concerns, male partners are running their own exhausting psychological program. They're constantly monitoring internal questions. Am I maintaining adequate duration? Is my partner genuinely enjoying this experience? Am I performing adequately? How do I compare to past partners? Should I modify my approach? This mental workload is psychologically exhausting, and here's the neurologically significant part. When the brain is actively managing performance anxiety, it literally cannot process pleasure signals with full effectiveness. The same neural pathways cannot simultaneously run threat detection protocols and pleasure reception processing. You're either in protective monitoring mode or sensory experiencing mode, but neurology doesn't support both simultaneously. This explains why many men experience what researchers call physical-only completion. Their bodies execute the mechanical process, but their minds were actively problem-solving the entire duration instead of experiencing sensation. They were managing, monitoring, and strategizing rather than surrendering to vulnerable experience. The psychological pressure to perform creates a self-reinforcing negative cycle. Anxiety about performance creates physical tension. Tension makes maintaining present focused awareness more difficult, which increases anxiety, which creates additional tension. This cycle continues with genuine pleasure and connection being the casualties. Many men rush toward physical completion not because they're selfish or impatient, but because they're psychologically afraid of losing physical readiness, afraid of duration concerns, afraid of not satisfying their partner, afraid of judgment or unfavorable comparison. So they race toward completion as psychological self-protection, which means they bypass the most emotionally connective and pleasurable phases of the intimate experience. When a man feels psychologically safe, when he trusts that he doesn't need to prove anything, that his performance isn't being evaluated, that his partner is genuinely enjoying shared experience with him, his capacity for intense, vulnerable, emotionally connected pleasure expands dramatically. The difference between mechanical physical release and profound intimate satisfaction is almost entirely psychological. Male bodies become capable of remarkable experiences when psychological safety allows the brain to stop managing and start genuinely feeling. Here's a relationship tool that requires no physical technique and works immediately: intentional verbal communication. Specific verbal cues can unlock capacity for surrender in ways that physical technique alone never achieves. Men are culturally conditioned to be performers, givers, the partners making things happen, so they often don't understand how to receive attention. They lack psychological permission to simply experience sensation without worrying about reciprocation or partner satisfaction. Your words can provide that permission in ways nothing else can. Consider phrases like, "I've got you," "Just focus on feeling this," "You don't have to do anything right now," or "Let me take care of you." These simple statements function as psychological triggers that allow the brain to switch from performer mode to receiver mode, a transition many men never experience. When you verbally communicate taking control, even briefly, you remove the burden of decision making and performance management from his psychological load. Suddenly, he can actually feel what's happening instead of directing it. This is when the deepest, most vulnerable pleasure and connection becomes possible. Communicating intentions before actions: "I'm going to focus here for a while," or "I want to see how you respond to this," creates anticipation and provides explicit permission to experience rather than participate actively. The combination of verbal communication and physical attention creates powerful dynamics where genuine surrender becomes possible. During intimate experiences, provide verbal feedback that validates responses. "I love feeling you respond to this," "I'm really enjoying this connection," or "Watching you relax is incredibly attractive to me." This creates feedback loops where his pleasure becomes your pleasure, which removes any guilt or pressure he might feel about receiving focused attention. The transformative magic happens when you combine verbal permission with the anatomical understanding we discussed earlier. Your words create the psychological safety that allows his body to respond fully to appropriate physical attention. One without the other is beneficial. Both together creates transformation. Let's discuss something that creates discomfort for many women: being visually present during intimate moments. But understanding why visual connection matters so profoundly to men can reframe this from objectification to emotional safety and validation. For many men, witnessing their partner's genuine pleasure and engagement represents the ultimate validation that they're creating positive experiences. This isn't about objectifying bodies, it's about witnessing evidence that partners are genuinely enjoying shared experience, which allows them to relax psychologically and enjoy it too. When partners hide faces, eliminate lighting, or remain completely silent and still, male anxiety escalates dramatically. The brain interprets lack of visual feedback as potential disinterest or discomfort, which triggers the performance anxiety we discussed earlier. But when partners maintain eye contact during vulnerable moments, when they allow visual witness to genuine reactions, when they don't hide responses, that visual feedback creates emotional safety. It communicates nonverbally: "I'm present with you, I'm enjoying this shared experience, you don't need to worry or monitor." This proves especially powerful during oral intimacy. The visual of partners clearly enjoying what they're doing, making eye contact while providing pleasure, showing genuine enthusiasm rather than dutiful participation. This combination of visual and physical connection creates intensity that either element alone cannot achieve. Consider this experiment. Next time, instead of closing eyes or looking away, maintain eye contact for just a few seconds during a particularly vulnerable moment. Observe what happens to his response. That visual connection creates vulnerability and intimacy that transforms experiences from purely physical to deeply emotional. Being visually present isn't about being judged. It's about being witnessed in moments of genuine pleasure and connection, which represents one of the most intimate gifts partners can offer each other. Now let's discuss one of the most powerful psychological techniques for creating profound experiences, the strategic pause. This is sometimes called edging in sexual health literature, and it's based on straightforward but powerful neurobiology. Here's the neurological process. As arousal builds, dopamine floods the brain, and sexual tension accumulates throughout the entire nervous system. The longer partners can maintain highly aroused states, right at the threshold of the point of no return, the more intense the eventual experience becomes. The technique involves straightforward communication, bringing arousal close to completion, then backing off completely, changing activities, slowing dramatically, or pausing altogether for several seconds, kissing, touching different areas, taking breath together, then rebuilding arousal again. Each time partners approach the threshold and consciously pull back, they're allowing additional dopamine and neurological tension to accumulate. They're also teaching the body to experience pleasure as a sustained state rather than a race toward a single moment. The key involves reading signals, breathing changes, muscle tension, verbal cues, body responses. When sensing approaching completion, that's when partners pause. The first cycle might create slight frustration, but by the second or third cycle, the anticipation itself becomes profoundly arousing and psychologically connecting. When partners finally allow completion after multiple cycles of building and pausing, the release becomes exponentially more powerful. Instead of a brief moment, you've created a prolonged experience where pleasure and connection build progressively until they finally release. Frame this as collaborative exploration you're experiencing together, a form of intimate teasing where the journey matters more than the destination. The anticipation and buildup are where most of the psychological bonding and profound satisfaction actually develop. Here's a crucial neurological principle many couples miss. Repetitive, unchanging stimulation actually decreases sensation over time. The brain habituates to predictable patterns through a process called sensory adaptation, which is why the same steady rhythm that felt amazing initially starts feeling less intense as time passes. The solution involves strategic variation. Change pressure, firm contact followed by feather-light touches, vary speed, fast and urgent, then deliberately slow. Mix techniques, different types of movement focusing on different anatomical areas. This unpredictability keeps nerve endings firing actively and keeps the brain fully engaged with sensation. Instead of zoning out or experiencing numbness to repetitive motion, the nervous system stays alert and responsive to novel stimulation. Consider using different approaches with varying rhythms, one providing steady contact while the other uses varied techniques. The contrast between consistent and changing sensation creates neurological complexity that single approach stimulation cannot match. Experiment with different sensory experiences too, using lubricant for smooth sensations, then switching to dry contact for different friction, then back to slick again. Even something as simple as occasionally varying pressure or technique creates sensory variety that prevents neurological habituation. The goal involves maintaining engagement through appropriate unpredictability. When partners can't predict exactly what's coming next, when each moment brings slightly different sensations, the brain stays fully present and engaged rather than drifting or disconnecting psychologically. Let's discuss what happens immediately after male completion, because this is where many couples make a crucial relational mistake. The moment he reaches completion, the penis becomes hypersensitive, sometimes even uncomfortably so. Continued direct stimulation can actually be painful rather than pleasant due to neurological sensitivity. But here's what most people don't understand. While that specific area becomes temporarily sensitive, the rest of his body floods with endorphins and oxytocin, the bonding and relaxation neurochemicals. This creates a perfect neurological window for deep emotional connection and relationship bonding. Instead of immediately separating or jumping up to clean up, consider staying close and shifting to gentle, non-genital touch. Run fingers through hair, lightly scratch his back, trace patterns on his chest, hold him close. This aftercare serves multiple psychological and relational purposes. First, it prevents the disconnection or emotional drop that can occur when physical intensity ends abruptly. Second, it anchors the experience emotionally rather than leaving it as purely physical. Third, it creates neurological associations between pleasure and your presence, deepening attachment and desire for intimacy with you specifically. This also represents prime time for quiet conversation, comfortable silence, or simply being present together. The combination of physical satisfaction and emotional connection transforms what could be a transactional encounter into a profound bonding experience. Many men report that these gentle, connected moments after the main physical event are what they remember most vividly and crave most deeply. The physical pleasure is wonderful, but the emotional safety and connection are what create lasting relationship satisfaction and intimacy. Before we conclude, let's address something important. You might be wondering if focusing this extensively on male experience means neglecting your own pleasure and needs. The answer is absolutely not, and here's why the research is clear on this point. When men experience deep, emotionally connected satisfaction, not just physical release but genuine psychological fulfillment, they naturally become more emotionally available, more generous partners, and more invested in their partner's pleasure and satisfaction. This isn't about selfless service, it's about creating a positive feedback loop that benefits both partners substantially. A man who feels genuinely satisfied, who has experienced vulnerability and surrender with his partner, who associates her with the deepest pleasure and connection he's capable of feeling, that man becomes infinitely more attentive to her needs, desires, and emotional well-being. By mastering the psychology of male intimate satisfaction, you're not diminishing yourself or your needs. You're creating a partner who feels safe enough to be vulnerable, connected enough to be genuinely present, and satisfied enough to focus generously on you. His deep satisfaction serves your relationship and your pleasure directly through this psychological reciprocity. So here's my challenge to you. Select just one concept from this video to explore and communicate about. Perhaps it's the verbal permission phrases, perhaps it's understanding anatomical sensitivity zones, perhaps it's trying the strategic pause technique. Start with whatever feels most natural and comfortable for your relationship dynamic. Remember, intimacy is a space for exploration and connection, not a performance evaluation. There's no perfect execution, no grade you're trying to achieve. It's about curiosity, communication, and discovering what creates the most pleasure and satisfaction for both partners. The beautiful truth is that you now possess knowledge most couples never discover. You understand that male pleasure and satisfaction are psychologically complex, emotionally nuanced, and deeply connected to relational safety. You know the specific psychological needs that create the most profound satisfaction. You have communication approaches that can transform routine encounters into transformative bonding experiences. Here's what I want you to do. If this provided valuable insight, please like this video and share it with friends who might benefit from these relationship psychology principles. Drop a comment below. What surprised you most? Your questions and feedback inspire future content. Subscribe if you haven't already, because we're building a community of people who demand real, psychologically informed relationship guidance. We explore beneath surface-level advice here, and I'm just beginning to share what I want you to understand. This knowledge provides quiet confidence and genuine relational power. You're no longer guessing or hoping. You understand the psychological map of male intimate satisfaction and can choose how to navigate it through informed communication and mutual exploration. Go explore, be curious, communicate openly, and most importantly, enjoy the journey of discovering just how deep and connected intimate satisfaction can be when both partners feel safe enough to fully surrender to vulnerability and connection.